The broken research ship lay silent on the edge of the desert, half buried in sand, as if the planet itself wanted to swallow it whole. Metal ribs poked out from the wreck like the bones of a dead animal, and every time the wind hit, the structure groaned with a deep, lonely voice. Inside those ruins, a young alien girl named Myra moved slowly through the shadows, holding one hand over her injured leg. She tried not to breathe too loud, but every breath felt like fire in her throat. Her heart kept beating fast, full of fear and exhaustion. Myra was scared of being found, not by the ship's crew, not by the pirates, but by humans. In her world, the elders told many stories about Earth's people, stories of violence, of teeth and claws, of humans with no mercy and no souls. She grew up hearing that humans were wild animals wearing the shape of men and women. She never expected to see one in her life. She hoped she never would. But fate is strange. After escaping from the holding cells 3 days ago, she had been crawling through dead ships and dry dunes, searching for water, for shelter, for anything that could help her survive. Her leg was bleeding when she escaped, and now it had gone stiff and swollen. She knew she couldn't last long. Her throat felt like dust. She had nothing to eat. The sky above this planet was big and cruel, filled with heat in the day and freezing black in the night. Myra leaned against a broken crate and closed her eyes for a moment. She told herself not to sleep, but sleep pulled at her like a heavy blanket. She whispered weakly, "Just a moment, just to rest." Then she heard its footsteps. The broken research ship lay silent on the edge of the desert, half buried in sand, as if the planet itself wanted to swallow it whole. Metal ribs poked out from the wreck like the bones of a dead animal, and every time the wind hit, the structure groaned with a deep, lonely voice. Inside those ruins, a young alien girl named Myra moved slowly through the shadows, holding one hand over her injured leg. She tried not to breathe too loud, but every breath felt like fire in her throat. Her heart kept beating fast, full of fear and exhaustion. Myra was scared of being found, not by the ship's crew, not by the pirates, but by humans. In her world, the elders told many stories about Earth's people, stories of violence, of teeth and claws, of humans with no mercy and no souls. She grew up hearing that humans were wild animals wearing the shape of men and women. She never expected to see one in her life. She hoped she never would. But fate is strange. After escaping from the holding cells 3 days ago, she had been crawling through dead ships and dry dunes, searching for W-Not light steps like her own people, who walked soft and careful. These steps were heavy, slow, and steady, the sound of boots crushing sand and metal. Myra's eyes snapped open. Her breath froze in her chest. Panic filled her face as she tried to crawl deeper behind the crates, but it was too late. A tall silhouette stepped into the wide open gap in the wall, framed by sunlight. The figure turned his head, scanning the area. When he moved forward, Myra saw the sun bounce off metal. He was carrying a weapon. He wore a dusty coat, torn at the sleeves, and boots that looked older than the ship itself. His hair was short and messy. His face was rough, but young. His eyes were sharp and alert. He was human. Myra trembled harder, pressing her body against the cold metal behind her. Her hands shook, not from hunger this time, but from pure fear. She remembered the warnings. Never let a human see you. If they find you, they will either cage you or kill you. Humans have no souls. They enjoyed the screams of other beings. The human stopped walking. He turned slowly, and his eyes landed on her hiding spot. For a moment, nothing moved, not the wind, not the dust, not even Mira. She felt her fingers go numb. Then he spoke. "You alone." His voice was deep, rough, and tired, not angry or happy, just real. Myra swallowed, but said nothing. She wanted to speak, but no words came out. Her throat refused to open. The human tilted his head at her silence. He didn't yell. He didn't point the gun at her head. Instead, he lowered it to the ground and waited. After a few seconds, Mira forced her voice out. "Why, yes." The human studied her face for a long moment. She expected him to laugh and drag her away. Instead, he sighed, almost annoyed, but not at hurt, the world around them. "You're bleeding," he said. Mira blinked. That was not something a monster cared about. He shifted the weapon onto his back and looked toward the open desert. "This place gets bad at night. Creatures come out when the sun falls." Then he looked back at her, his dark eyes steady. "If you stay here, you'll die. Move before night." Myra stared at him, confused. Why tell me that?" He shrugged once. "Because it's true." He turned and began to walk out of the broken ship. Mira hesitated, questioning everything she believed, then pushed herself up and limped after him because even fear was better than dying alone. She didn't know his name yet. He didn't ask hers, but that was the first moment Myra learned something that shook her beliefs. A human did not kill her. He warned her. He saved her from the night. The desert sun was a harsh, golden fire as Myra limped behind the human, every step sending sharp pain through her injured leg. She watched him carefully, noticing how his movements were careful but natural, how he stepped over debris without hesitation, how he scanned the horizon constantly. Despite the dust and scars on his boots and coat, there was a calm in him, a rhythm that made her chest ache with something she didn't understand. After a while, her fear gave way to curiosity. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The words were soft, almost a whisper, but he heard her. He glanced back briefly, eyes sharp. "Helping. Maybe, or maybe I just don't like seeing someone die where it can be avoided," he said. There was no boast in his voice, no pride, just a simple, strange honesty. Myra shook her head. "You are a human, aren't you? My people say humans are monsters. You have no mercy. You have no souls." The human stopped walking and turned to look at her properly for the first time. His eyes were dark, steady, not angry, not cruel. "Your people tell stories," he said quietly. "Stories don't always tell the truth. Sometimes they make monsters out of the world to keep you scared." Mira hesitated. She wanted to believe him, but the warnings were strong in her mind. They say, "You kill for fun," that humans eat anything that moves, that you don't care for others. He laughed softly, a sound like dry leaves blowing across sand. "Sometimes we eat things that move, yeah, but mostly we cook it first," he said, smirking. Myra blinked. It wasn't funny. It was absurd. And yet somehow it made the fear in her chest ease a little. He wasn't smiling at her pain. He wasn't threatening. He was. Joking the joke made Myra look at him in a new way. She had never imagined a human could be like this. Not angry. Not cruel. Not a beast without a soul. They walked in silence for a while. The wind shifted, carrying the dry scent of sand and metal. Myra's leg throbbed. She wanted to stop, but the human never slowed, never hesitated. He seemed to know exactly where he was going. Finally, as the sun sank low, painting the sky in red and gold, he stopped near the ruins of an old cargo wing. The shelter was half collapsed, but it would keep the wind and cold away at night. He dropped his pack and pulled out 2 bars of food, handing one to her. Myra stared at the bar, then at him. Why are you giving me food? You'll move faster if you're not starving, he said simply. His voice was calm, no expectation, no judgment, just truth. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she could survive on her own. But the pain in her leg and the exhaustion in her chest made her hands close around the bar. She tasted the crumbs in silence. It was bland, but it filled her stomach and eased her trembling. Night fell, slow and heavy. Shadows crept across the sand. Strange cries echoed from far away, creatures she had never seen but had been warned of. She huddled close to the human, unsure if she should trust him, unsure if he would harm her, unsure if humans were truly as monstrous as her people claimed. The human, who had not said much since giving her food, looked at her once, and she saw something in his eyes that stopped her breath. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't hate. It was careful, protective, almost like he was measuring every risk for her, not for himself. Her heart beat fast, a strange warmth building in her chest. She had never felt this before. Never from any human. Never from anyone. Fear and confusion warred inside her. Finally, she whispered, barely audible, "Why? Do you care?" He looked at her, eyes tired but unwavering. "Because you're alive, and it's not hard to keep you that way." His words were simple, almost too simple, but in them was something she could not explain. Something that made her think that maybe, just maybe, humans were not the monsters her people had painted. For the first time since her escape, Myra felt a small, fragile flicker of hope. She limped closer to him, trying to hide the weakness in her legs, trying to feel something other than fear. She realized she was starting to trust this human, this stranger who had stepped into her life and seemed to care, even a little. And deep down, she wondered if the stories her people told were wrong. Maybe humans were not beasts without souls. Maybe some could be more than she had ever imagined. As the sky darkened and stars blinked open, Myra stayed close to the human, her breathing slowing, her fear still present but less sharp. In that moment, she decided to follow him, even if her instincts screamed to run. She had no other choice and, perhaps, in some strange, unspoken way, she wanted to see what a human soul could truly be. The desert night pressed down around them, silent but watchful, and 2 unlikely companions moved forward together, their shadows stretching long across the ruins. Night in the desert was darker than Myra had ever imagined. The stars seemed distant, cold, and uncaring, and the wind whispered through broken metal like a warning. Her leg ached with every step, but she followed the human, Cole, without questioning him. She didn't have the strength to run, and even if she did, she would have nowhere to go. Cole moved carefully, his boots crunching softly on sand and scattered metal. He held a flashlight in one hand, sweeping the beam ahead. Myra stayed behind, trying to match his pace. Her body ached from hunger and exhaustion, and every breath felt heavy, but she kept walking. She had no choice. "Careful," Cole murmured suddenly, his voice low, warning her without needing to explain. This area, it's trapped, could be old pirate snare traps. They still work even if the pirates are long gone. Myra froze, looking down at the uneven ground. Her chest tightened. Traps. Her mind raced with all the warnings she had ever heard about humans, how humans set cruel devices, how they laughed at pain, how no mercy existed for anyone not their own. But Cole didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He only looked serious, scanning the sand and metal ahead. She nodded silently, forcing her leg to move. Every step was agony. The desert night seemed alive, pressing down on her with unseen eyes, making her skin crawl. Suddenly, her foot caught a small stone hidden beneath sand. She stumbled forward, trying to catch herself, but it was too late. The ground beneath her shifted. There was a loud metallic snap, sharp and sudden, like a scream of iron dot. Myra froze. Her heart leapt into her throat. The sound was unmistakable. A snare had been triggered. She looked down and saw thin wires glinting faintly in the flashlight. Panic seized her chest. Cole shouted, his voice cutting through the darkness. "Move now?" But the snare was faster than her reaction. In an instant, dozens of spring-loaded flechettes shot up from the sand. Tiny metal spikes, each one sharp enough to pierce bone, flew straight at her chest. Myra screamed, eyes wide, helpless. She tried to dive, but the wire caught her foot, throwing her off balance. Cole didn't hesitate. He ran forward, shouting her name, and without thinking, threw his body on top of her. The spikes hit him first. One after another, his back was pierced, and Myra felt the impact as shock waves through his body. He grunted in pain but didn't release her. His arms went around her, pulling her flat to the sand, shielding her with his own flesh. Blood sprayed across her arms and face, warm and sticky. Myra cried out, panic and fear tearing at her. "No, move. Let me go." Cole's voice was strained but steady. "Stay down. Don't move. I've got you." The world seemed to slow. Myra felt the cold kiss of metal on her back and shoulders, the burning shock of pain transmitted through Cole's body into hers. Time stretched as the last flechettes hissed past. Then, finally, silence returned. The night swallowed them again. Myra pressed herself against him, shaking uncontrollably. His breath was ragged. Blood seeped through his jacket and onto the sand, dark against the pale light of the stars. He groaned, trying to push her gently away, but she held on to him, terrified. "Why? Why did you do that?" she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. Her voice shook with confusion, fear, and something deeper, something like awe. Cole forced a weak smile, even through the blood and pain. "Because you were there. That's enough," he said. His voice was low, breaking with effort, but firm. He tried to sit up, but his body wouldn't cooperate. Myra's hands went to his back, pressing against the wounds, trying to stop the blood, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her mind screamed at her, "He is a human. He is supposed to be a monster. He is supposed to care for no one." But he had risked his life for her. His blood had spilled so she could live. The thought made her chest tighten and tears blurred her vision. For the first time in 3 days, fear mixed with something else, gratitude, and an unfamiliar, fragile sense of trust. Cole tried to chuckle through the pain, a faint, broken sound. "Guess this is my way of being human," he murmured, coughing. Myra shook her head, not understanding fully, but feeling it in her bones. Humans were not always the monsters she had been told. Some, at least, could be more. She pressed her face against his shoulder, whispering, "Please. Stay with me, please. Don't leave me." Cole's hand trembled slightly as he touched hers. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Above them, the desert night seemed endless, filled with shadows and silent stars. But in that small, ruined corner of the world, a fragile bond began to form between a human who had risked everything for a stranger, and a girl who would never believe humans could have hearts at all. The desert night was cold and cruel. Mira pressed herself against Cole, feeling the warmth of his body soaked in blood. Each shallow breath he took made her heart thump faster, her stomach twist with panic. She had never felt this close to a human before, never trusted one enough to let him touch her life so completely, and now his life was slipping away because of her. Cole tried to shift, groaning softly, but the pain made him freeze. Mira placed her hands on his back, pressing against the flechette wounds. The warmth of his blood soaked through her palms, and she gagged at the metallic taste. Her mind raced with disbelief. Humans were supposed to be monsters. But this human, had thrown himself onto her, taking the pain and the danger that should have been hers. "Stay still," Cole gasped. "Just stay down." Mira nodded, trembling, tears burning her eyes. She wanted to scream at the world, at the desert, at herself. She wanted to demand why anyone would risk their life for a stranger. She had never known anything like this. Her people said humans had no souls, that they would leave others to die without thought. But here was proof that the stories were wrong. Her hands pressed harder against his wounds, trying to hold back the bleeding, though she knew it was hopeless. "Why? Why did you do this?" she whispered, her voice cracked. "You don't even know me." Cole managed a weak, painful smile, wincing as another shiver of pain ran through him. "Because you're here. That's reason enough," he muttered. His words were simple, almost too small for the weight they carried, but they struck Mira harder than anything she had ever heard. She leaned closer, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. "Humans, they're supposed to be beasts without hearts," she said quietly. "They're supposed to hurt everyone. They're supposed to leave you to die." Cole coughed, blood trickling at the corner of his mouth. "Guess I'm not most humans," he said, voice breaking but steady. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Only the wind whispered, moving sand and rattling the ruins. Myra's chest ached, not just from fear, but from a strange, heavy gratitude. The kind that made your throat tight and your hands shake. She had been taught to fear humans, to distrust them, but now she realized fear was not the whole truth. Courage, care, and sacrifice existed even here. Even in someone who should have been a stranger. Suddenly, faint footsteps echoed from the dunes. Mira's head shot up. Her pulse jumped. Creatures or humans? The flashlight Cole carried had fallen during the struggle, leaving them in partial shadow. "Hide," Cole whispered, his voice strained but firm. "Stay low. Don't make a sound." Mira pressed herself further against him, feeling his shallow breaths through her hair. Her hands clutched his arms, feeling the tension in his body. He was bleeding, but he was still alive and he was still protecting her. She wanted to move him to cover, but even a small shift made him grunt in pain. "I'll be fine," he hissed. "Just keep hiding." Mira swallowed hard, forcing herself to obey. Her mind raced with fear and confusion. This human, this strange, wild creature she had been taught to hate, had become her protector. He had become something she couldn't understand, something she could only feel. Minutes passed. Hours, perhaps. The footsteps faded into the distance, leaving only the desert and the ruined ship. Mira stayed pressed against Cole, not wanting to leave his side even for a second. She could feel the slow, steady thump of his heart beneath her hands, the warmth of his blood against her palms. "I thought humans were monsters," she whispered. "I thought they didn't care. I thought they would let me die." Cole groaned, turning his face slightly toward her. "Not all of us," he said. Some care. Enough to bleed. For someone else." Myra's chest tightened. Her throat burned. Tears slipped down her face without permission. She realized she had been wrong about everything. Her people had lied. Humans were not all cruel beasts. Some could be heroes. Some could be kind. Some could give their lives so that a stranger could live. She pressed closer to him, feeling the rhythm of his weakening heartbeat, feeling the life that had chosen to fight for her. The desert night stretched endlessly, but in that small, ruined corner, a fragile bond was forming, one built on trust, fear, and a sacrifice neither of them could forget. Above them, stars blinked cold and silent. The wind whispered through the sand and metal, carrying the weight of the night. And Myra, trembling, realized that for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be protected, what it meant to be cared for, and what it meant to live because someone had given their life to shield her. Her fear remained, but now it was mixed with something stronger, hope, because she had seen a human's heart and it had saved her. The desert night was still alive with danger. Strange noises echoed across the dunes, howls from creatures Mira had never seen, the faint crunch of boots on sand, and the whisper of metal rubbing against metal. Myra's heart raced as she pressed herself against Cole, who lay half-conscious beneath her. His blood soaked the sand and her clothes, and each shallow breath reminded her that he was still alive, but barely. "We need to move," Cole whispered, voice weak. His hand barely managed to lift, brushing against her arm. Myra nodded, swallowing hard. She had no choice. She couldn't leave him, but staying in the open meant death. Using every ounce of strength she had left, Myra lifted Cole carefully. She tried not to make noise, but each movement made him groan in pain. His body was heavy, his wounds deep, and yet she carried him as though he were a feather, because his life depended on her. The desert sand clung to her legs, slowing every step. Every crunch of gravel felt like a shout in the silent night. "Keep low," Cole gasped. "Shadows. You're friends now." Myra ducked behind a half-buried metal wall. She pressed her hands against Cole's back, checking the wounds again. Blood seeped through her fingers, sticky and warm. Her chest ached. She felt helpless, but she refused to let panic take her. She had seen death before, but she had never been this close to losing someone who had saved her. Suddenly, lights flickered across the distant dunes. Mira froze, her pulse hammering. Humans, creatures, pirates. She didn't know, but she knew they were being hunted. "Quiet," she whispered, her voice trembling. Cole's hand brushed hers weakly, a silent acknowledgement. They stayed pressed against the metal, hiding under the black shadows of the ruined cargo wing. Mira's eyes darted around, scanning for a path, a way out, A miracle. Hours passed, though it felt like days. Myra's legs burned, her arms trembled from holding Cole's weight, and the world around them seemed endless. The night whispered, cold and endless, and yet, in that darkness, a strange connection grew. Myra realized she had come to rely on him not just for survival, but for courage. His sacrifice had sparked something inside her, something she couldn't name. Why? Why did you do it? She asked quietly, brushing her blood-stained hair from her face. Cole's eyes, barely open, met hers. Because you were there, he muttered, voice strained. I didn't think. I just moved. Myra's chest tightened. His words were simple, but heavy. She had never known such selflessness. Her people had always taught her to fear humans, to see them as beasts. Yet here was proof that they could be more. They could bleed so that someone else could live. She swallowed hard, pressing her forehead to his shoulder. I thought humans were cruel, she whispered. I thought you would leave me to die. Cole coughed, blood dribbling at his lips. Some are, some aren't, he said. Not all. Monsters. Myra's hands shook as she adjusted his position. She pressed against him, her mind racing. She didn't understand how someone could risk everything for a stranger, but she felt it in her bones. She felt it in her chest. Humans were not all beasts. Some were heroes. Some were like him. A faint sound of movement came again. Myra froze. The desert night seemed alive, waiting. She tightened her hold on Cole, feeling the warmth of his body against hers, feeling the rhythm of his weak heartbeat. She was terrified, exhausted, and yet determined. She would not lose him. Not now. Not after everything. Hours dragged into the blackness until the sounds faded. Myra's arms ached, her body trembled, but she stayed with him. She whispered encouragement, soft words that barely sounded like speech but carried all her hope. Stay with me. Don't leave me, please. Just stay. Cole shifted slightly, wincing. I'm still here, he whispered. Still. With you. Myra pressed her face against his shoulder. Her tears fell silently onto his blood-stained shirt. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel everything. Despair, gratitude, and a strange, growing warmth for the human who had saved her. The desert night stretched endlessly, but in that quiet, broken corner of the world, a bond had formed fragile, raw, and unbreakable. Myra understood something she had never imagined. Sometimes courage did not roar. Sometimes it bled quietly into the night. Sometimes life itself depended on the heart of another. And Cole, despite everything, was living proof that humans were not all monsters. He had chosen her, life over his own, and she would never forget it. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the desert, soft and pale. It painted the sand in gentle gold, but it did little to warm the cold fear gripping Myra's chest. She pressed herself against Cole, who lay slumped on the sand, blood staining his shirt and hands. His breathing was shallow, ragged, and every shiver of pain made her chest tighten. She had carried him through the night, hidden him from the dangers of the dark, and now the weight of what he had done for her pressed on her heart. He had thrown himself onto her, taken the brunt of the snare, bled for her. Myra had never known such a sacrifice, such a selfless act in her life. Her people had said humans had no souls, that they were beasts. But here, before her eyes, a human had proven them wrong. Tears ran down her cheeks, warm against the chill of dawn. Mira pressed her hands against his chest, against the blood, against the life that was slipping away from him. "Please, stay with me," she whispered, voice shaking. "Please, don't leave me. I can't survive without you." Cole's eyelids fluttered, and he managed a weak smile, though it was lined with pain. I'm here," he murmured. Still, breathing still, alive. Mira shook her head, her hair falling over her face. "Why?" she whispered, almost to herself. "Why would you risk your life for me? You don't even know me." Cole's lips quivered into a faint grin. "Because you were there," he said. His voice was soft, broken, but steady. "That's enough. That's reason enough." She stared at him, blinking back tears, trying to make sense of the emotions twisting her chest. Fear, gratitude, awe, something she could only describe as hope mingled together. She had expected death, cruelty, abandonment. Instead, she had found life, kindness, and sacrifice. Humans, at least some of them, were not the monsters her people had claimed. Her hands trembled as she pressed cloth against the worst of his wounds, trying to staunch the bleeding. His skin was cold, but not lifeless. Each shallow breath reminded her that he was still here, still fighting. She whispered softly, "I thought humans had no hearts, no souls. I thought you would just let me die. But you're different." Cole managed a weak laugh, though it was painful. "Some of us are," he said, his voice faint. "Not all. Monsters." Mira's chest ached as she pressed closer to him. She realized she was crying for him, not just for the fear, not just for the blood, not just for the night, but for the humanity she had never seen before. She had been taught to fear humans, to hate them, to see them as cruel and heartless. And yet, here he was, bleeding so she could live. "You bled for me," she whispered. "You risked everything for a stranger, and still you stayed." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her forehead to his shoulder. I don't know how to thank you. I never thought humans could care like this." Cole reached up weakly, brushing a strand of her hair from her face. His fingers shook, but the gesture was tender, human, real. You don't need thanks," he whispered. "Just live." "For both of us," Mira nodded, tears streaming freely. Her heart was heavy with emotion, but also lighter with understanding. She realized something in that moment. Courage, love, and mercy did not belong to any one species. Some humans were monsters. Some humans were heroes. And some, like Cole, were proof that a soul could shine brighter than the desert sun. Even in the darkest night, she stayed with him as the sky brightened, holding him, whispering words of comfort, praying for the life that still clung stubbornly to his body. Each shiver, each groan, each ragged breath reminded her that he had chosen her life over his own. And that choice, that sacrifice, would not be forgotten for the first time. Myra understood the weight of true courage, the courage to give everything for another being, without question, without expectation. Her people had been wrong. Humans were not beasts without souls. Some could bleed so others could live. Some could protect a stranger with their body, their life, their everything. Myra pressed closer, whispering, "I see you. Now I see your soul." Cole's fingers brushed hers faintly. "Then you "Understand," he whispered, his voice fading with weakness. But still holding warmth, she nodded against his chest, tears wet on his bloodstained shirt. The desert light grew, soft and golden, and for the first time, Mira felt a fragile hope. He was still alive. She could still save him. And even if she could not, she would carry the truth of this night in her heart forever. That humans could be more than the monsters stories had claimed. That night, and this dawn, would change her forever. Because she had seen a human soul and it had saved her. The sun climbed higher, over the desert, turning the dunes golden and burning the shadows into nothing. Mira pressed herself against Cole, who was weak but still alive. Each step toward the distant settlement was slow, every movement a